Greetings. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. In today's lesson, we will be discussing about subtracting similar or dissimilar fractions. But before that, let us know some important definition of terms used in this lesson. A fraction is defined as a numerical representation indicating the quotient of two numbers. The top number is called the numerator and the bottom one, the denominator. The numerator denotes how many parts we are taking, while the denominator denotes how many equal parts the whole is divided into. Example, Juan ate 1/2 of the cake. From the situation, we can say that the cake was divided into two equal parts, since our denominator is 2. And Juan ate 1 part of the cake, since the numerator is 1. Forms of fractions. Number 1. Proper fraction is a fraction whose numerator is smaller than its denominator. Example, 7/8. Since the numerator, 7, is lesser than the denominator, 8, then this fraction is a proper fraction. Number 2. Improper fraction is a fraction whose numerator is equal to or greater than its denominator. Example, 7/3. Since the numerator, 7, is greater than the denominator, 3, then this fraction is an improper fraction. Number 3. Mixed fractions, composed of a whole number and a fraction. Example, 6 and 1/3, where 6 is a whole number and 1/3 is a fraction. Groups of fractions in an expression can be similar or dissimilar. Similar fractions are fractions with same denominators. Dissimilar fractions are fractions with different denominators. How to subtract similar fractions. Method number 1. Step 1. Subtract the numerators. Step 2. Copy their common denominator. Step 3. Reduce the answer to its simplest form if possible. Sample problem number 1. 9/12 minus 5/12. First, we subtract the numerators, that is, 9 minus 5. We would have 4 as the answer. Second, we copy the common denominator of the two fractions, which is 12. And lastly, we reduce the answer to its simplest form. Since 4 and 12 are divisible by 4, we divide both numbers by 4. This would give us the final answer, which is 1/3. Therefore, 9/12 minus 5/12 is equal to 1/3. Sample problem number 2. 17/29 minus 11/29. First, subtract the numerators, that is 17 minus 11, which is equal to 6. Second, copy the common denominator, so we write 29 as the denominator. Lastly, we simplify if possible. Since there is no common factor between 6 and 29, then 6/29 is the final answer. So, 17/29 minus 11/29 is equal to 6/29. Method number 2. This method is quite similar to the first one, but since this would be important on the next discussion, I will present this to you. Sample problem number 1. 15/19 minus 7/19. First thing we do is we write a fraction bar, then write the common denominator of the fraction, which is 19 at the moment. Next, we copy the numerators and write the operation used, so we have 15 minus 7. Then we solve. 15 minus 7 is equal to 8. Lastly, we will try to simplify if possible. 8 and 19 doesn't have a common factor. Therefore, 15/19 minus 7/19 is equal to 8/19. Sample problem number 2. 5/7 minus 2/7. First, we write a fraction bar, then, the common denominator of the fraction, which is 7. Second, We copy the numerator and write the operation used, that is, 5 minus 2. Then we solve. 5 minus 2 is equal to 3. Lastly, we will try to simplify if possible. 3 and 7 doesn't have a common factor. Therefore, 5/7 minus 2/7 is equal to 3/7. How to subtract dissimilar fractions. Method number 1. Step 1. Determine the least common denominator. Step 2. Get the equivalent fractions. Step 3. Subtract the numerators and copy the common denominator. Step 4. Reduce the answer to its simplest form if possible. Sample problem number 1. 2/5 minus 2/7. First, we will determine the least common denominator, LCD. LCD is a number that can divide both the denominator into equal parts. To find the LCD, we get the multiples of the denominator and find the first common, or the least common multiple. Tips on writing the multiples of our denominators. Tip number 1. Do not write multiples which is larger than the product of the two denominators. Tip number 2. Write multiples of each denominator in 5 samples, or whatever number it is convenient for you. From our problem we have 5 and 7 as our denominator. So we have to write the multiples of 5 and multiples of 7. The product of these two numbers, 5 times 7, is 35, so we should not exceed writing multiples up to that number. Second tip is to write in 5 samples. First 5 multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. First 5 multiples of 7 are 7, 14, 21, 28, 35. Since the multiples of 7 reached 35, we don't need to further write its multiple. We will try to continue writing the multiples of 5, and find the common number amongst the multiples of 7. Continuation on the multiples of 5. 30, 35. Therefore, the least common multiple of 5 and 7 is 35. Since 35 is our least common multiple, this number would also be our least common denominator. Second, get the equivalent fractions. Increase each fraction to higher terms so that the denominator of each is 35. We first look at the first fraction, 2/5. We need to find a number that when multiplied to the denominator 5 will make it to 35. And that number is 7. Next is we multiply 7 to the numerator and denominator, giving us 14/35. Now we proceed to the next fraction, 2/7. We need to find a number that when multiplied to the denominator 7 will make it to 35. And that number is 5. Next we multiply 5 to the numerator and denominator, giving us 10/35. Now we have 14/35 minus 10/35. Third, subtract the numerators and copy the common denominator. That is, 14 minus 10 is equal to 4, with a denominator of 35. Lastly, we simplify the fraction if possible. Since 4/35 is irreducible, then this would be our final answer. Therefore, 2/5 minus 2/7 is equal to 4/35. Sample problem number 2. 1/2 minus 3/8. First, determine the least common denominator. Multiples of 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Multiples of 8. 8, 16. The least common multiple of 2 and 8 is 8. Therefore 8 is their least common denominator. Second, get the equivalent fractions. We look at the first fraction, 1/2, and try to find a number in which when multiplied to the denominator 2 would have an answer equal to 8. And this number is 4. Then we multiply 4 to the numerator and denominator of the fraction. Next we look at the second fraction, 3/8. since the denominator is equal to the least common denominator. We don't need to multiply anything to that fraction anymore. So we have 4/8 minus 3/8. Third, we add the numerators and copy the common denominator. For minus 3 is equal to 1, then copy the common denominator, which is 8. We have 1/8. Since 1/8 is irreducible, meaning it can't be reduced to simpler term, then 1/8 is our final answer. Therefore, 1/2 minus 3/8 is equal to 1/8. Method number 2. Sample problem number 1. For fifths, minus 5/9. First we need to find the least common denominator. Multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Multiples of 9. 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. Continuation of multiples of 5. 30, 35, 40, 45. The least common multiple of 5 and 9 is 45. Therefore, the least common denominator is 45. Second, we write a fraction bar on the right side of the equation with 45 as denominator. Next process would be tricky. First look at the first fraction 4/5. Take the LCD 45 and divide it to the denominator of the fraction, which is 5, and we have 9. Next, multiply the answer to the numerator. That is 9 times 4, which would give us 36. Write the answer to the right side of the equation, then copy the operation. We now proceed to the second fraction. Doing the same process. Divide the LCD 45 to the denominator. That is 45 divided by 9, which is equal to 5. Then, multiply the result to the numerator. We have 5 times 5, which would give us 25. Write the answer to the right side of the equation like this. Now we have 36 minus 25 over 45. We solve to have 11/45. Since the answer is irreducible, this would be our final answer. Therefore 4/5 minus 5/9 is equal to 11/45. Sample problem number 2. 1/2 minus 2/5. First, we get the LCD of 2 and 5. That is 10. We write a fraction bar on the right side of the equation with 10 as denominator. Second, we try to focus on the first fraction. Next we do the following. Divide the LCD to the denominator. That is 10 divided by 2, giving us 5. Then, we multiply the result to the numerator. That is 5 times 1, giving us 5. We write the answer to the right side of the equation and copy the operation. We proceed to the next fraction, 2/5. Divide the LCD to the denominator. That is 10 divided by 5, giving us 2. Then, we multiply the result to the numerator. That is 2 times 2, giving us 4. We write the answer to the right side of the equation next to the operation. Now we have 5 minus 4 over 10. Now we solve. 5 minus 4 is 1. So we have 1/10. Since the result is irreducible, therefore, 1/2 minus 2/5 is equal to 1/10. Now, let us try to test what you have learned. Try to answer the following problems. Pause after the question and play it again when you have the answer. Try to check if you have given the correct answer. I hope that it gave you an idea on how to solve similar and dissimilar fractions. Feel free to replay the video to have mastery on the topic. Have a nice day.